Hey guys, before we get started, just want to give you a heads up. You might notice the sound quality of future episodes is greatly improved. That's because we finally got some nice insulation in the podcast room, some soundproof panels. So hopefully that should clear up the issue I know I've had in a couple of episodes with the sound quality not quite being on par. Also, if you haven't already, follow us on Twitter at UnbrokenThePod and join our Facebook community, The Unbroken Circle. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Welcome to Unbroken the Podcast. I'm Savannah Levins. I started this podcast because in my life experience and working as a news reporter, I found that everyone's been knocked down or blindsided or had their world seemingly turned upside down at some point. And for many people, it's cathartic to talk about their experiences out loud. And likewise, it can be therapeutic to hear other people's stories and know there is light at the end of all darkness. If you have a story you'd like to share on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Just email unbrokenthepodcast@gmail.com and please rate, review, and subscribe. Today on the podcast, we have Casey talking about something that's actually pretty common, growing up with only one parent in the picture. Casey learned his dad didn't want him, and to this day, they've never spoken. Now, as an adult, he's realized it affected him more than he realized, and he's learning to lay it all out there and deal with it. Here's Casey. All right, today on the podcast, we have Casey. Casey, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
My second man on the podcast, we were saying.
Right?
And I'm glad that you came on. Your email to me, the subject line said, growing up fatherless.
Right.
And that's something that you have experienced, and you said you didn't realize maybe until later in life how much it really impacted you. And now as a teacher, you've seen it in your students as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So mine is unique in the fact that I've literally never met him in my life. Never had a contact, and don't have like the movie where there's this like lost letter that I get to read when I graduate that says congratulations, here's your inheritance. Nothing like that. And on top of it, what's made mine somewhat unique is my mom, unless she is like sneakier than I could ever imagine, hasn't gone on a date since 1987.
Wow.
So it's kind of made a bizarre thing for me. And like I was telling you in the email, I was like, I don't even know, because this is everybody, not everybody obviously, but I feel like this is such a common thing that nobody talks about. But it does. Like you said, I didn't realize it impacted me until I was in my 20s. I just kind of ignored it. I buried it. It wasn't a thing. People were more interested in it than I was. I was like, yeah, I don't have a dad. What of it? But it didn't really hit me, like I said, until I was in college.
So let's start in the beginning, if you don't mind. Growing up, tell me what that was like. And did you notice that, why don't I have a dad and the other kids do? And how did that play out with, like, your mom? And
yes, I did notice there was not a male around. But it was, I remember having a conversation when I was like, it's one of my first memories, when I was like, 5, 6. Driving like in the mall parking lot and asking my mom like the point blank question, where's my dad? And she, I wanted you, he didn't. And it was really, I was like, oh, okay. And then I kind of like plodded along. And I was fortunate that I did have a lot of male influences in my life. My mom is one of 6, and they're all brothers.
Oh, wow.
So they all got to play their different roles at different times of kind of being that male father figure. And then bigger than any of them was my grandfather. So it was me, my mom, my grandma, my grandpa, all the way until I graduated high school. My senior year, my grandpa passed away. And that was really the start of me connecting all the dots and like feeling this emptiness, which again, it's so weird to say, like it's common sense. It's one of those things I feel like we always, when we deal with stuff with other people, we're like, how do you not see that? And like, it's okay to hurt and feel that. But when, at least with me, when it's me, I'm like, oh no, like that's not a thing. That's not an issue. I've got to be tough and strong and blah, 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 blah. It just was. It was just the situation. It was something every now and then, kids would use it to make fun of me. You don't have a dad, whatever. And, but other than that, like I said, it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I went, oh, this is affecting me in real ways, and I need to cope with it. I need to deal with it head on rather than burying it.
So you brought up that like first initial memory you have of being like, where's my dad? Oh, he didn't want you. Did you ask questions more later, or did you just kind of accept that? And
that's the weird part. I like to think of myself as a curious person, but I don't really open that door. on my hand count how many times me and my mom have discussed my dad. And one other time on top of that with my grandma, when she's kind of the most, it's like the cliche, that is the cliche movie scene where the grandma is going to open up and tell you all the realities. Like, oh, like, because I never knew, like, did they date? Were they in? Like, I have no idea. And then my grandma's like, oh, no, I really liked your dad. And it was the same thing. He just didn't want a kid. And that was all there was to it. And then my mom had a conversation when I was trying to fundraise money to go to India like 12 years ago. I was coming up short, and out of nowhere she goes, well, if it comes to it, we'll ask your dad. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm going to go somewhere else because that's weird. And then, honestly, 4 or 5 months ago, I was just having a bad day and kind of bluntly asked my mom, I was like, what's the deal? Like, I'm an adult now. We haven't had a real conversation about this essentially ever. And I was like hoping for big, but it was kind of a lot of the same stuff. She was like, I know where he lives. Like, he has a Facebook. He just doesn't have any interest. And I kind of asked the question, well, if I reached out, it's like, nah, he probably wouldn't respond. And it's just kind of weird.
Yeah. And you said you didn't realize till later that it actually affected you and who you are. What made you realize that?
So I was very blessed in college. So early college years, the best way I can describe, I had like a zealot phase where I was like all in Christianity, going to church, had a nonprofit I volunteered like 20 hours a week to, like crazy stuff. And with that, I had like a Bible study I was in, and one of my friend's dad, Guy, who is one of the lifesavers of my life, I always say he's kind of like a religious John Taffer, where he just like will yell at you, and then he's like, hey, but like I actually care about you. Like, fix it. So one thing I just kind of said, I was like, yeah, I don't have a dad, but it doesn't matter. And he goes, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I was just like, and it was able to process like all of this stuff. I've struggled. I've walked through acceptance issues everywhere. In high school, I didn't have my fit. I was a round peg in a square, round peg, square hole type situation for years. And even when I was accepted in a group, I was always worried to be kicked out. And it wasn't until he helped me walk through it. I was like, oh my God, it's because my father didn't accept me from day one. And it was really trying to walk through that stuff. And it was kind of what I mentioned in my email, is there's that extra layer of being a guy and like sports, the whole thing, and you're just told you aren't supposed to be weak. Like, weakness is failure, and that's all it is to it. And like, I guess that's kind of what was mentally going on in my head of burying that stuff, was no, that makes you weak. You can't walk through that. You can't process that, which thankfully somebody shook me and woke me up from, and I was able to go, oh, okay, this is what this is born out of.
Yeah. Do you think it was more the idea of growing up subconsciously not feeling wanted? Do you feel like it was more not having a positive male role model in your life permanently in that way? What do you think exactly it was? Or was it a combination? I mean, it could be all.
It was definitely a blend of both. So like I said, I had my grandpa in the house. And really what the first peg of all of this is when he got sick. Well, he got sick and passed away, and we knew about it all in about 6 weeks. The family's working theory is he knew for months, and that was just the person he was. He wasn't going to tell anyone. He didn't want the attention. It was pancreatic cancer, and that's kind of what brought me like into the Unbroken world. Was you posted the Trebek thing, and I was like, oh, like, and then that just all went there, and that. So my grandpa passes away my senior year, and that was there was no physical and like there was no person there that was that rock anymore. And then it just started to open that, well, the person that's supposed to be here isn't.
Yeah. And then you mentioned, just now and then in your email, the whole thing that I think a lot of people call toxic masculinity. Did you feel like you were making that up to fill a void, or do you think...
It's hard to say. Like, it's hard to say what pressure came from what, but I think it was definitely, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I was trying to earn my dad's love on the football field or on the basketball court. but I was definitely in that zone of like I can tell you every cliche story of like got to be tough, got to act like. I mean, literally, it's always my students will tell you this about all the time, all my mangled fingers from that, and I never took it off because it's like, oh, you can't quit, you can't be blah 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 blah. So, I mean, yeah, the toxic masculinity stuff definitely. It's hard to explain, like, because it's not this. It's very buried that like you just have to be this certain way. Nobody even specifically tells you it just is, and you have to, again, it's something you have to work through and go, this is stupid. Like, guys hurt and it sucks. Like, my best friends all like I laughed because Game of Thrones ended last night, and two of my friends admitted they cried. Like, two of my girlfriends were like, yeah, I straight up cried when, and I won't spoil it for people because I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
No. I know what you, and I feel like that it's a little bit of a culture shift, and that's interesting in itself. But then, another reason you said you emailed me is not just you realizing that it's impacted you and wanting to be open about that, but now as a teacher of middle school students, right?
Yes.
You've seen this a little bit in your students and seeing how it affects young people. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, I don't think if my father were in my life, I don't know if I'd be a teacher. And it almost makes me thankful that it worked out that way. Because these kids need, especially, look, the reality is I work with, I think there are 50 of us, and I think there are 4 guys in the building.
Wow. And
that's typical. And these guys often don't have any male figure, like I didn't in middle school, to look up to, like I'm saying. And the one story that comes always to my mind about this is there was this kid who always acted so much like me, it was scary. Like, even low-key kind of looked like me, where the nickname was, oh, you're Miller's son, like blah, 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 blah. And you never didn't hear him in the classroom until one day I didn't. And it was noticeable. About 20 minutes into class, I look, I'm like, he must not be here today. There he was, and he was dead quiet. So I grab him, when I'm on my planning, I'm like, dude, you all right? And his story, not to go too much into it, is he got just like me, and then his father got arrested doing some really dumb stuff the night before. And just to be able to look him in the eye and be like, dude, I know, and you're not him. Because you could see that fear in him, that he was destined to become this. Because I think a lot of us have this fear, like, we're going to become what our examples are. It's like, you're not him. You're too good of a kid. I was telling you before we went on that I had a kid go through this stuff where and the biggest thing I can look at them and tell them is, it's okay to admit this sucks. And it's okay to feel pain from it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it'd be weird if you didn't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Where do you think that pain and the difficulties come from? Is it having to find role models elsewhere? Was it the taunting and teasing you endured? What was the toughest part?
I think it all just comes back to that. I think we're definitely wired. We're supposed to have that. Like, it's just supposed to be there. It just comes back to that abandonment. Like, the other stuff was hard, and the other stuff, some of it's easy to work through, some of it wasn't. But at the end of the day, it's that abandonment of, at the end of the day, and I can logically say, it was nothing about me personally. He was gone before I was even alive. But there's that whatever that says you weren't good enough for the person that was supposed to take you over everything no matter what. How are you going to be accepted by anybody else?
That's hard. Yeah.
And it just, it's not active, it's not a daily thing, but it's kind of like it just sits there in the back of your mind sometimes in really weird situations.
For someone who is in that situation, young or old, who maybe has that in the back of their mind subliminally, any advice you would give and putting that out there and dealing with it?
Well, I think that's the first part is find a group that's going to hear you. And believe me, it took me a long time because I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to be the drag. Like, blah, 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 blah. I've been lucky. I've got a handful, not a ton, but a handful that are like down. And when I'm feeling it, I can call them and talk to them. My biggest thing of understanding it is, like I said, it took me forever to understand that it was okay that it sucked. and just accept the fact that, you know what, because so many times you see when like people try to do pick-me-up talks, it's do this, and so many times it's like, well, first of all, this freaking sucks. And it's okay that it sucks.
Yeah.
And nobody gets to dictate how you process this. So I don't know if I have any like straight up like, oh, just go do X, Y, and Z advice, but I mean, have some people you can talk to, and don't be afraid to let people know this sucks. This is part of me.
Yeah. I'm picking up that you very much want to be a positive male role model for kids. Do you think that that's what that kind of comes from?
I think that's, again, a subliminal, like, yeah. Absolutely. I think, straight up, I remember, I think this was last year, 2 years ago, that they asked, why are you a teacher? And I said straight up, like, because a lot of people have never seen a male act appropriately. Because sometimes I even told one of the kids that was going through this, I said, in ways, me never having one is kind of better off, because at least I don't have a bad example. Like, they've never seen that positive thing, and not that I've got it all figured out, but I'm trying to do it right, and I try to be, because I couldn't stand the teachers that would just be so dishonest with you and act like everything was rainbows and butterflies. I'll be straight up with them, like, no, this, and this, and like, I don't have the fact, like most of the kids know, like, yeah, Mr. Miller's never met his dad, like, but hopefully they see he's going forward.
He's still okay.
Yeah,
he's still someone I would look up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think you'll reach out to your dad someday?
I don't know. Because that was the last conversation with Mom. Like, the information's there. I still at that point, and it's, the older you get, it's just the reality of, like, that door will close on you. I'm not, like, all I can answer is right now is I'm not in any hurry to do it. If there comes a moment where I feel, like, the biggest information I want from him right now is just, like, the cliche disease stuff, and I'm like, if I'm that desperate, I'll just do 23andMe. That'll take care of that for me. So right
TBD.
Now, TBD, absolutely.
It's 2019. There are a lot of single parents out there. Divorce rates are really high. For parents maybe listening who are single parents, is there any advice you could give them as to how best handle that?
I'm glad you said that, because I need to praise my mama, because I haven't done that enough. Like, I remember when I was little, I almost joked that I didn't have a mom, because my mom was my basketball coach. My mom was way more of a yeller dad type, so my mom did an awesome job raising me. She's still, she's been absolutely great. So if I've introduced Mom to the podcast world, but not to this one. So if she finds this one, hi, Mom. You did really good. Yeah. To those single parents, just love them. Like, they're gonna be grateful for you. I get them. Like, I have the middle schoolers, so everyone thinks their middle schooler's insane. I'm like, it's just a middle schooler. You got a good one. But to those single parents, just love them. Whatever that means. That's not an easy... I mean, I don't have kids, so it's not the easiest answer. I have the students, but that's nowhere near the same thing. But just love them. Just support them in everything. They care when you show up to stuff. I just know that, and I know that's not easy. And I know there are times parents don't get that, and I fully get that. But when they show up, they freak out when their teachers show up. So when they're parents, they notice. So just be there for them.
Yeah. Anything else to add or mention? Any final words before we say goodbye?
I'm usually a man of a lot of words, but I think that's all I got.
No, it's been great. I mean, I think your point is a good one. And again, so many of these stories I have on there are applicable to so many situations. I mean, even if someone's listening and they have both parents, but maybe are lacking role models in other areas at work, it's hard to go on and not have someone to look up to, and to feel like you're not wanted, maybe even in relationships, or feel like you're not worthy of something. That's really, really hard to grapple with. So I think facing it and realizing, pulling it out of your subconscious, recognizing that it's there, and kind of wanting to be better is awesome. And I'm glad that you're a role model for these kids. They're lucky to have you. Thank you so much for coming on Unbroken. I appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening to Unbroken, the podcast. We'll see you next time.